All right, guys, I think we'll go ahead and get started here. First off, thank you guys for coming. Just a few housekeeping items really quick, a few announcements. The food, as you guys see where all the food is, bathrooms just down the hall to the left. Just want to tease our next event, actually. Our next event will be in September 19th. And it will be at MetaFast. It will be about transforming to a product culture. So if you guys would like to come to that, that's been officially announced. Also, we have some volunteer roles open here at Product Guide. If any of you guys want to help out, we always need help with events, AV stuff, helping putting events together. You don't even really have to know how to do AV. We are willing to teach if you guys are willing to learn. So that interests you, please let us know. Yes, you can knock out. Anyway, remix. I just wanted to give a big thank you to Canopy. Not only are we have a great speaker here, but they're also providing the food and the place. So let's give them a hand. All right, before I kick it off, hand it over to Shane. Shane is the CPO here at Canopy, and he oversees the strategy. He's truly a strategy expert, as his efforts have helped make the access for Workfront and SimpleNexus. And he's going to share a little bit about that. He's also a bit of a Renaissance man. His hobbies include mountain biking, mandolin, cooking, and wheel painting. So let's give him a warm welcome.
Thank you all for being here. I know many of you and others I've met today, and others hope to get to meet. So I'm going to dive right in, and just thank you. Thank you for your support. So to begin with, I thought I'd give a little bit of background of myself and some of the experiences that I've had. And so I put together this timeline, and as I was thinking about what I want to say and share, I had these slides a few different places in this deck, and then something fun happened. I realized after many days and looking at these a lot of times that this was actually completely incorrect. Thought, wait a minute, I didn't go from LexisNexis to Workfront, so I corrected that. And there's somebody Pearson. Anyone here from Pearson? Okay, that's good. Because my hope today is to really explain some of the benefits and experiences that I've had, mostly with Workfront, Bynder, SimpleNexus, and maybe a little bit of Canopy. But I thought it was really interesting that putting this together, especially something where I'm sharing stories and lessons from these companies that not only did Pearson not even cross my mind as a candidate to talk about, but I didn't even forgot that I worked there. And so my hope today is that I can help all of you grow companies or find companies that are more like these that I've been so blessed to have some success with, and not the Pearsons of the world. So welcome to any of those. With this too, I will focus more on Workfront, Bynder, SimpleNexus. Workfront was acquired by Adobe, Bynder by TDHL, SimpleNexus by nCino. I've got dollar figures there. And of course, being a participant of an exit, you get some financial rewards, some more than others. But really, it's not about the money, in my opinion. It's more about just having that success, building something of value, making a difference in people's lives, and having that experience that then makes you more attractive for kind of the next round. And also, probably most of all, finding fantastic people to work with, to get to know, to learn from, is really one of the biggest things. Before diving into some of those stories of those companies, I do want to give a little bit of history of how I got into product to begin with, because that might be changing right now with more of a different generation. Maybe some of you did think, oh, I want to be in product or product design UX when you grow up. But at least for me, that's not how it happened. I was always into art and computer science. and decided to major in architecture, actually. So I went to UFU, studied architecture, and then got done with my degree there, and suddenly realized that I didn't want to be an architect. So I got, oh, great, now what? So I got a job at Onyx Graphics, really just tech support. And it was really just, I thought, okay, during the summer school, I figure out what I'm going to do with my life, was in tech support. And somebody gave me the advice of do your next job now. So, okay, now I'm going to apply that. What would I want for my next job? I don't really want to be tech support manager, but QA test and stuff, but that looks kind of cool. And we already had a procedure of if we found a bug, how to report it to QA. But I went to QA and said, hey, like, could I get access to the QA system so I can just log the bugs directly? So, oh, yeah, sure, there you go. And so I started going into work a little bit early, staying a little bit late, just to find bugs. And I was actually pretty good at breaking software. And so after a very short period of time, I was logging more bugs than the entire QA department. I was really 3 people, but still, it was nice. And then QA was like, hey, you want to work in QA? Yeah, yes, please get me off the phones. And then that was going well. And pretty soon I was managing the QA department. And QA was like, well, how am I supposed to know what to test? Like, who's coming up with what you're building? So, oh, the devs just kind of do, whatever they want. And said, don't you want to be more proactive and plan and do some research? And said, yeah, would you mind doing that? I said, yes, please. And so that's kind of how I got into both product and UX. So, and on the UX side, it was way before Figma or Sketch. So I was using Photoshop or Illustrator, like version 2.0 to do this work. So just a little bit of background. Then went back for an MBA, BYU, LexisNexis, and the rest is history. So with that, I'm going to today talk about 6 lessons, 6 stories. Normally I like having questions during the presentations, but I've got a lot to go through, so I'll probably say, write down your questions, and I'll get them at the end. And Nick, please give me the sign if I have enough time for that. And yes, I will give a lot of several unpopular opinions, but that's okay, because if you don't like what you hear, you get your money back. That's a guarantee. So first lesson, find out who you are and who you want to be. And I've come to find out that this is probably one of the biggest problems for individuals and for companies, is kind of a mismatch on who companies need and who people want to work for. And so, hopefully you are all very familiar with the concept of product market fit, finding the right product solves those needs. But there's also something that I don't think it's a real term, but for this purpose, person company fit, to really know, what are you well suited for. And because today I'm going to be talking about startups and scale-ups, I'm going to be focusing more on that, because I think that is a little bit unique. It's just a different lifestyle. And so for anyone thinking of joining a startup and scale up, just be aware of what you're getting into and kind of what that entails in terms of work hours and pain and ambiguity and all of that. And again, there's nothing against those that want more of a life-work balance. I've got a lot of friends that have less high-pressure jobs, and they love it. In fact, sometimes I wonder, maybe I should be doing that. And so it's really just a question to ask yourself, really, what do you like to do, and where do you think you would be a good fit? And one example of that too, it was announced recently that Sterling Stowe was appointed as the CEO of this company, Redo, for a local company. And I know you can't read the text, so I'm going to read just a little bit here. It says, it takes a special type of crazy for someone to want the insane challenges that come in the startup world. It's really not for everyone, even though we feel like it's the absolute best thing in the world. The kind of mood that keeps you up at night in the best way possible. Come work on a mission, don't punch a time card. We are looking for people that fit that special type of crazy. Do you look for ways to push your limits, figure out what you're capable of, find energy in surrounding yourself with people that make you question if you can keep up? Set goals so ambitious that any normal person would laugh at you for it. But you get fired up. Truly push yourself to become the best in your craft. Enjoy outsized rewards for the outsized contribution provide. if you made it through all that without rolling your eyes, saying something like, "Oh, stupid hustle culture, yuck, not for me," then there's a chance you're the exact type of person we're looking for. And again, I'm not saying that this is for everyone, but this is a good example of a company setting the expectations, being very clear upfront on what they want. And so again, it's just very important to know, who are you and who do you want to be, and make sure you are aligned with a company that fits. So a quick story on that. And I'm going to talk about kind of Workfront in the earlier days a little bit later on. So, but for this story, I'm going to pick up where Workfront was already kind of down this new target market for marketing groups. And as part of that, we had identified a few things that we needed to build to be tailor-made for marketing groups. One of those was an approval and approving process. One of those was a digital asset management system, or DAM, and the juvenile jokes were limitless with that. And then also a marketing calendar. And so at Workfront, we identified these areas that we needed to have. And I think a lot of people just naturally jump to, okay, let's get building this. But time to market is so critical. And so we needed to get there as quickly as possible. And so instead of building everything, we decided marketing calendar, we're going to build the proofing engine we're going to need to integrate with. And then we eventually acquired a company. But then for digital asset management, kind of where you store the files and all of that for creatives, we wanted to maybe acquire, but at least integrate. And so I started doing my research about what companies we could work with. There's a company called WebDAM, there's one called Bynder, there's one called Widen. And so I flew to all of those and kind of kicked the tires and kind of found out if they would be interested in a partnership or potential acquisition. Bynder and Widen were not, but WebDAM, they were actually very interested in either an acquisition or an integration. So at Workfront, we tried to acquire them. Many visits, due diligence, and all of that. We were outbid by Shutterstock. So Shutterstock acquired WebDAM, and I talked to WebDAM and said, "Hey, well, can we just integrate with you anyway? We'll do a white label arrangement." And they said, "Yeah, sure, that works." So we did that. We called it Workfront DAM. And then about a year later, the CEO of WebDAM that I've been working with a lot, her name is Jody Vandergriff, and she's a true powerhouse. And she said, "Shane, I've loved working with you. This partnership's been great, but we need a head of product over here at WebDAM. So why don't you and your family move to California, where you can get half the house for 5 times the price and work for us?" And we did it. The financials should not have worked out, but we thought, okay, this is a good opportunity. And so this was really my true startup. Bootstrap. They didn't take on any funding. This was, second mortgage, all their savings, put it into this. And wow, if you want to learn about work ethic and really making things work no matter what, this is the type of environment that you should experience. And so we had a great time there. And yeah, a lot of late hours, and sometimes we were there until 2 and 3 in the morning, not because the system was down, but just because we needed to get stuff out the door. We needed to succeed in the marketplace. But we actually had a ton of fun doing that. But then suddenly something changed. Bynder, which is one of the companies that we had looked at for an integration or acquisition, found out that they had approached Shutterstock and said, "Hey, we want to buy WebDAM." I'm not totally surprised, because we were eating Bynder's lunch, because we were doing so well, especially in the US market, that Bynder, who was headquartered in Amsterdam, was really worried that they just wouldn't keep up. And so Bynder worked with Shutterstock to acquire us, WebDAM. And I was appointed to be head of product for the new combined entity. And that was a lot of work. And if you think about geography, where San Francisco is located, and then Amsterdam, due to very poor planning, is nowhere close to San Francisco. And so that's a lot of time zone differences. I would wake up at 5 in the morning to work with the European crew, but then in the San Francisco crew, I'd be there till 6 at night, and a lot of travel all through Europe. And so a lot of work. But probably the hardest thing that I had to do was, these were very duplicative systems. And I knew that there's just no reason for both of them to exist. And so I had to take my inventor and product hat off and put my business hat on and say, okay, which of these do we need to kill? And sure enough, it was the one that I had invested a lot of years and blood, sweat, and tears building, mostly because Bynder just had more of an infrastructure, they had more of the clientele, so that was the right decision. And so we decided to eventually sunset the web dev product. The Salesforce and all that, survived, and so luckily there wasn't too much of an impact on personnel, but it was one of those tough decisions that you need to be aware of. So lesson 2, know your company, and more importantly, choose your company wisely. That's probably actually the key point here. I do feel like maybe it's a little bit of clickbait for the title of this presentation, because building a unicorn, one, is just so involved, but two, at least from my experience, it was actually finding people that were already making good progress in building that unicorn. And so a lot of people say, wow, you've got a great track record, so you can just go to any company and make it unicorn. It's like, no, definitely not. Probably my biggest skill set is the ability to evaluate a company and to determine how is it positioned and how will it succeed in the marketplace and what can we do to improve that. So I do like to think that I helped and brought something to the table, but one of the lessons that I would like to share is what you can do to really evaluate the company in which you want to join. Again, part of that, again, person company fit, figure out the work ethic and working hours and all of that. But a lot of that is just understanding the company itself. Because when you join a company, you are literally becoming an investor. Not only, hopefully, will you be getting some decent equity, but just think about all the time and energy that you are putting forth in this company. You are investing in yourself and the company to be successful. So you need to act like an investor. And that's probably not what you learn in any product training, but there's a lot of things that you can do to really dive in. And so the next story is interviewing SimpleNexus. And you might think that's kind of backwards. Was SimpleNexus interviewing me? Yes, of course. But also I was interviewing them to make sure that not only was it a good fit, but are they going to be a successful company? Because I don't want to join a company that's not going to succeed. And so, and with SimpleNexus, so I was still at Bynder in California, still enjoying it, but the kind of 16-hour days and international travel was starting to get a little hard to handle. And so I had somebody from my Workfront days, Austin Miller, who had left and founded ISO Talent, recruiting company. He had reached out and said, hey, Shane, got this company. I think you'd be great for it. Would you be willing to move your family from California back to Utah to join SimpleNexus? And at the time I said, probably not. Like, at least not yet. It's something that maybe down the road, but he said, hey, it's a short plane ride. Just come out, talk to the people there, and let's go from there. So, okay, do you a favor, Austin. I'll go out there. And went out and met with the team, and it was amazing. And with that, I want to find out, is this the right company for me? Is it going to succeed? And so specifically, when you were doing this, one, like if you don't know what any of these things are, then learn. Google these and kind of become an expert at these terms. These are things that the CFO or the CEO will really care about. These are great things for you to be aware of as well. One, to make sure that within product design, that what you were doing really aligns to these to be successful. And also it's a great way to look really smart during your interview process. And so again, depending on position, like if you're going to be exec level, then for sure entry level designer, less so, but still good to be aware of. And so I just grilled the CFO on all of these and was getting really good numbers. In fact, so much so that I thought, this is for real. Especially the NPS. NPS of 75 in B2B to C SaaS, like that just doesn't happen, but I'm not gonna call you out on it right here. So those are things that you want to find out. And then also just in terms of questions to ask, it is very critical to find out who leads strategy. Because I have a very strong opinion that product design should lead strategy, not just product strategy, but company strategy. So you need to find out, well, what does that look like today? Is there a place for product to not only be involved, but to lead this? How much influence does your role have? See the investor deck. Again, you are an investor, and so you should be able to see the investor deck. Sales pitch deck as well. Get access to the product. Play with it. This is something you're going to be owning. And so you need to know it inside and out, at least enough to have a good taste for it and know if it's something that you can really work with and make better. And find out what top strategic things that they're struggling with. Because I guarantee you they're thinking about this and they're grappling with these really tough questions. Ask about those. Get a feel of how they address those problems. And one thing to mention is that I'm a big believer that the company matters a lot more than the position or title or salary. And so, and I want to be cognizant too, I know many of you are, looking for jobs right now, and it's difficult and it's probably hard advice to be very critical on the company when it's a very tough hiring market. I'm cognizant of that. My heart aches for you. I've been in that position, and I know the sleepless nights and the worry that you have for your family. But one thing to think about is be willing to at least consider taking a step back, or maybe even 2 steps back. There's been several times in my career that I have taken a lesser position and salary to get into the company that I knew I needed to be at. Kind of the analogy is, if you're going to be on a rocket ship, who really cares which seat you're in? It's the same destination. And also, once you get into the company, then there's lots of opportunities for room, growth, etc. So next lesson is to know your team. And this is pretty critical. And your team means very different things based on the position that you're hiring for. For me at SimpleNexus, this was the exec team. And so Matt Hansen, the founder here, which Mitch Nikolai knows very, very well. And it is very critical to get to know your team so you can serve them, work very well together. And by team, I mean the team that you work with the most. And so if you're within product or design, your team would typically be your squad, not necessarily PMs or designers, but it's the people that you are working with to build what you need to build. And with that, we would, as an executive team, we would do book clubs. And one of them was Voice in the Boat, which you wouldn't think as a business book, but it's actually phenomenal if you have not read it in that lens. And we did feel that feeling of swing, that we were just so aligned that we were able to work together seamlessly to accomplish our goals. So I've got this little thing in my office at home that reminds me of the people that I worked with there. And so just know your team. Again, make sure that it's also a good person to team fit when you join the company. Okay, next up, who leads strategy? And this is critical. Like I just mentioned, it is very important that product owns strategy. And this is tricky to do because quite often, and I've had this happen a few times, is joining a company where I was the first product hire taken over from a founder/CEO. And this is tough, right? Because this is their big, this is kind of what they have worked towards and really wanted to see succeed. And suddenly you're kind of coming in like a foster parent and taking over. And so a few things to know. One is make sure that they are okay with that. Because like if I were to join Domo and hey, Josh James, like Josh James is going to own strategy at Domo. Like the only words you need to know at Domo are yes, sir, and then you'll be fine. But here, in most other companies, you want to have that influence and ownership over strategy. And so with SimpleNexus, with Matt Hansen, I had that frank conversation and said, hey, look, I care a lot about this. If I'm going to join, what does that look like for you? And luckily, he was like, oh, this is music to my ears. Like, this is not my strong suit. I'm looking for somebody to partner with to own this, so I can worry about other stuff. Yes, that's perfect. So it wasn't always that easy. With Bynder, with Jody Vandergriff, she was a little bit more involved, but still got to work with her. And with others, there's also a great strategy to take. And that is this wonderful business movie. If you've not seen the documentary on businesses, this is fantastic. And it's a great way to learn how you can kind of sprinkle in little ideas, feedback, research findings to leadership. Just bit by bit, takes some time, but start to bring things up. Oh, have this customer call. This is what we learned. Great insights, this, that. And over time, pretty soon, you'd be surprised. The CEO magically has this great idea. And when they do, you say, that's fantastic. Yes, I love it. Let's do your idea. And go forward. No ego. Don't get involved in that. Just let it happen. And so this is a great way to make sure that you can involve a strategy for a leadership position like a CEO that might be wanting to kind of hold on to those reins a little bit more. This is a great example. If any of you have not heard this, a lot of people just kind of assume that Steve Jobs invented the iPhone. That's actually totally not the case. The iPhone was a skunkworks project that he was doing at Apple that Jobs didn't even know about for quite some time. And once he found out, he initially wanted to squash it. It's like, we are not getting into the phone business. I mean, to be tied to a wireless carrier, because Jobs was so focused on the whole interaction experience, right? Beginning to end, controlling everything. And how do you do that without then putting up cell towers and all of that? So it kind of went against what he thought were very critical components of having successful products and services. But the team relented and was relentless in saying, no, like, think about this. The device continued working with Steve, and eventually he came on board and, of course, was an amazing success. So just another example in the real world of what that might look like. Okay, lesson number 4, know your market, or validate or define or redefine your market. And so first of all, if you are with an existing company, knowing your market is critical, because you've got your market, you've got your users / personas, and that's kind of where the job suite and all of that is in. But there are times that you may want to take a step back and say, I don't know what happened there, and ask yourself, are we in the right market? Should we pivot? Should we do something different? And so one of those examples that we had was at Workfront. So at Workfront, Workfront was essentially a Microsoft project in the cloud. It was Gantt charts. It was made for IT professionals, project managers, stuff like that, or really just anyone that might need to manage a project. Marketing groups kind of came out of this. So project managers, have a lot of different opinions based on different perspectives and roles. But the problem that we had at Workfront is that they were super cheap. They did not like to spend money. And also, at Workfront, we had a very different vision for how things should be accomplished, because project managers and PMOs were historically very top-down, command and control. He's like, what's the head honcho say, and how does everything else flow from that? Whereas at Workfront, we had the mentality and mindset of no, work should be more organic, more bottoms up, more collaborative. How do we do that? And we realized that these project managers just kind of bristle against really what we thought work should be. So the question was, so what do we do? Do we just keep selling to project managers, or do we do something else? And so we had a hypothesis. And the hypothesis was, instead of just selling this horizontal service, project management, to just whatever person, company, industry that's out there, what if we tailor our product and offering to a designated vertical? But we didn't know which one, or even if that was the right call. So we did a lot of analysis. And so I spent tons of time in Excel and just trying to really find correlations and patterns that might guide us in knowing what to do. And learned a couple things. One is that besides project managers, there were a couple industries that fared a little bit better than others. One was professional services. Okay, noted. But then another one that was even less common than professional services was marketing groups. And this one kind of surprises, like, oh, we can sell to marketing groups? Like, what does that look like? And we noticed a few things, is that the marketing groups had a few unique characteristics. One is that they almost always pay list price. And so they're more willing to spend. And two, they were the ones that really leveraged this new way of doing work, this way of being more collaborative and more team-centric, more outcome-focused and less top-down command control. So we thought, hey, this is a great fit, or at least thematically where we think things should go. But the big question is, one, is there a big enough TAM for us, total addressable market? Could we really pivot and have enough revenue from marketing groups? And then two, to what degree is our product really a good fit for them? Or is there something else that they need that we just could not deliver on? And so what we did is we formed an entrepreneurial type setup where we took one of the co-founders of Workfront. Oh, Workfront was originally at Task, so you'll see at Task on some of these slides. So Nate Bowler was one of the co-founders, and so he volunteered, said, hey, I'm going to be the GM of this new group going after marketing agencies and marketing departments. And they chose me on the product side, and then our head sales rep, James Mano, and our head sales engineer, Dan Swain. So it was the four of us really figured this out. And this was such a cool opportunity because this was like a little mini startup, but we're guaranteed a paycheck. It was like fantastic. You're so excited. And so one of the first things that we did to validate the market is we knew we didn't want to be overly influenced by the people that were currently using our product because they had already self-selected. They already had a bias. It was not a good indication of what the rest of the market would react to what we could provide. And so we hit the road. We visited a ton of people. Yes, some current customers, but mostly non-customers. Mostly people that had no clue who at Task or Workfront was. And we said, hey, we're just here to learn about what marketing agencies do and what creative directors and designers do in the real world. So, and yeah, Friday lunch or whatever. And we visited on site about 20 or 30 of these different companies. And it was amazing what we found out. A lot of the things that we're already kind of having this preconceived notions in our head and we're totally blown out of the water, and other things that we just never thought of in a million years came to light very, very quickly. And so we had a lot of success then defining what that looks like. And so one of the first things that we did is create a pitch deck. So this is before we changed the product at all. So we took our existing product that was not a perfect fit, but we changed the messaging. We changed the positioning. We changed how we sell to cater towards these groups. So we had a pitch deck. This is one slide of about 200, very, very lengthy pitch deck. there was kind of like a step-by-step demo of what we wanted to present. And so we've got these kind of the typical stats of, hey, this is what you'll get in terms of ROI and all that stuff. We also had a lot of really cleverly designed artistic things, because one of the things that we learned is that marketers and creative folks, they care about how it looks. In fact, one of them said, one of the quotes that I still remember was like, we would rather use a very attractive software that's broken than software that is ugly. But okay, noted. And so the pitch deck had to be immaculate and perfect, and we had this really creative design. Probably should include more examples here to show you those. But it was a way for us to start selling this before we even really had a product tailored to the market. And so it's kind of this concept of, sell first and then design, then build. And it really worked in this case. We did realize there were these three options that I mentioned. One, we needed a way to do approval processes and what was called proofing, the ability to take your Photoshop file, upload it to the system, so anyone, including the CEO or receptionist or whoever wanted to be involved, could open it up without Photoshop, scribble on it, make comments and all of that. And so we had that we eventually acquired a company, this digital asset management company that I mentioned already, Webdam. And then the last one was a marketing calendar. And this kind of goes into the next lesson, which is to know your customers well enough that you could fake the job for a couple of days. And so whether you're on the UX side or product side, either way, you should be talking to customers all the time. Make it a goal that a week does not go by that you don't have customer interactions. And it's also good to do things on site periodically. The reason why is because you just learn so much about their environment that you never would have guessed. I'll talk about that in a second. Non-customers. Again, this is critical because that's really what you're after. I mean, yes, you want to keep the customers you have, but chances are you're going to do that anyway, for the most part. What you really want is you want to attract the people that are not yet customers. And so that should be your focus. Talk to people that do not use your product yet. There's certain questions that are very critical is when you do these interviews. Find out what they do before they get into your software. What do they do after? What other software do they use? What other processes do they have in place? You should be aware of all of that. Get a really complete picture of what they are trying to accomplish. So one of these, so we had kind of the initial roadshow of validating this opportunity. That checked out. We started to sell. And that's really when I went back on the road to start figuring out, okay, what do we need to build? And what does that look like? One of the big ones we kept hearing is it's all about approvals. Because we had a file management system already, but for them, you couldn't just upload one file and call it done, because you'd have a version 1, a version 2, a version 3, a version final, a version final. And that was just what they lived with. And so we needed to completely change our product to show that versioning, show those comments and the history and the approvals of what was approved, who approved it, and when was it rejected, and built all that. And found this company that could do it visually and acquired them. And then also, so that's kind of an example of the approval thing that we made way back when. And then, as I was mentioning, when it's very critical to go on site and learn more about their environment. And I know it sounds weird, but if you just go and say hey, we will really like to shadow you and see you work in your environment. And I know right now, post-COVID, people work remotely, so don't go to people's houses. That's weird. But when people are in office, it's great to, when you meet with them on site, don't just go to a conference room. You can maybe just show the roadmap and stuff like that, but then have breakouts where you go and work where they work. So one example of that is we were actually validating this approval and proving thing. That was kind of on the agenda for our on-site visits, but we'd watch them work and learn a little bit more, and we'd go to their cubes. And then one day we noticed something like, that's a calendar. Like, we are a project management system. We manage your work. We're the place where you put dates and assignments. What do you use a calendar for? They say, oh, yeah, well, what you guys do, that doesn't really fit us. Because with a Gantt chart, like, you make it change to one little task and everything gets bumped out. But we're dealing with trade shows. We're dealing with events. We are dealing with launches. Those dates don't move. We need a way to put hard lines in a calendar and say, this is what we need to accomplish by this date. And we suddenly realized that, wow, our software doesn't do that. Like, it was made for more good project management, more for software and stuff like that. So the first time we noticed this, we didn't think too much of it. It's like, oh, okay, that's kind of weird. Next visit, same thing. Next visit, same thing. And suddenly we realize this is one of the big things we need to address. So we defined it. Product marketing managers spend all this time manually creating this, and it just doesn't tie into the data system. And so then back on the road to do more research specifically for calendars. So these are all the people that we visited on site, a bunch of people that we talked to on the phone, other research, competitive intel and stuff like that. And then came out with a set of artifacts. So we got examples of these. Whenever we see one hanging on the wall, say, can we take a picture of that? Or if it's digital, can we get a copy of that digital file? And we collected 50 plus examples of these calendars that were just perfect for us to learn from. And so, we need to build something that can replace these. That became the goal. That's kind of what we gave the team. That's something else, kind of a side tangent in terms of product requirements. I'm not a big believer in big PRDs. Like, share the vision. Okay, dev team, your goal is to replace these. The moment that these customers use our software instead of this, you're done. Got it? Okay, get to work. That's what I like in terms of requirements. And then we had, UX, do prototypes, we validated those, typical process that you're all familiar with, and created those, launched it, was a phenomenal success. Okay, last one, think innovation, not exit. So a lot of startups and scale-ups, they get overly preoccupied with, well, when are we going to exit? Is it going to be a strategic exit, or is it going to be a PE firm that buys us? And when is that going to happen? Is it going to be this year, next year? Scrap all that. Don't think about it at all. Okay, maybe a teeny bit, but mostly not at all. Your focus is creating innovation. If you create a great product, if you are truly solving these user problems, the revenue will come. And if the revenue comes, acquisition will come. Good companies are bought and not sold. So an example, the final story, this for close for mortgages. Again, Nikolai and Mitch and Brittany, they can correct me if I say anything wrong. But we did a lot of research on what does this process look like. So at SimpleNexus, we built software for mortgages. So we sold to mortgage lenders, loan officers, but really we viewed it as a three-sided marketplace. That we had the client, the borrower, essentially, somebody that wants to buy a home and needs a mortgage, got a loan officer, and the real estate agent. Those three people each had their own interface with our products, both web and mobile. And we mapped out every single step of the process that they need to do. Even stuff that we did not support in our product. And that's very critical. You need to have a holistic picture of what everything looks like, even if you were doing a subset. And then that provides a great opportunity for you to evaluate, what if we did go into this area that we didn't do today? What if we did remote appraisals for real estate agents? What if we did something on the title company side? It suddenly just gives you the big picture. So we have this, and it was very helpful for our roadmap. And this was, January, February 2020. And we started hearing about this virus thing in China, but it's not like it was China thing, so we're not going to worry too much about it. Oh, maybe China and Italy. Maybe some other places. And then like come February, we started to think about like, what if this did have a big impact on us? And so we knew that even though like our whole premise of the company was to facilitate the mortgage process digitally, we didn't do it like all the way to the end of the road. Last mile stuff that you do for close and title, we didn't really touch. And so suddenly we thought, ooh, we might want to do that. We might want to do it really quickly. And so we rearranged the roadmap to prioritize e-close. And sure enough, COVID hit really hard, as you all know. And yeah, mortgages needed to be done digitally. And the interesting thing about this is that with what we were building with eClose, like we had the big vision of, oh, they need to be able to do everything. So not go to the title company. They need to be able to just like even do the notarization process online. But we didn't have that built out yet. But still, we kind of sold the vision and told people like, hey, we understand COVID's going on. It's really tough. We're working on it. In fact, we've got some things we can do already. So, a lot of e-signatures that you can do. And then just the handful of things that you need to do in person to minimize contact. But still, we were one of the first to do that. And we were heavily rewarded for it. And especially because as you probably know, like during COVID, interest rates were at historic lows. So a combination of very low rates, people needing to transact digitally, and us jumping to the forefront of eClose was perfect for us. We solved those problems. We were very successful. Net revenue retention was going through the roof, like 175% net revenue retention. And this is a perfect environment for us to be approached by nCino, which then acquired SimpleNexus. And I remember I was on one of the first calls with nCino. They said, hey, we want to look at SimpleNexus to see if we can do an integration. And I was kind of like, I don't think it makes sense, but sure. Showed you the demo. I said, no, we really think it makes sense to do an integration. Said, no, I don't think so. But then the next call, I noticed their corp dev person on the call, like, okay, now I know what you're. And so suddenly quickly turned into talks. And again, we were not seeking an exit. And we, in fact, those that had approached us, we pushed away, said, no, not interested. And even when nCino talked to us, we said, we're not interested unless it's at this price point. I said, yeah, I think we could do that. Oh, okay then. Yeah. And the rest is history. So that's kind of the last story. And again, this is a huge topic in terms of strategy, vision, and all of that. But hopefully there are some things that are helpful for you. So just in summary, find out who you are. Make sure that you are a good fit for your company. Know your company inside and out, especially the financials, and knowing what metrics you are there to improve. Get to know your team, your market, your customers. And finally, think innovation and not exit. So that's it. So any questions? Yes.
Great presentation. I'm Sanjay, by the way. The question, in one of your slides, you talked about talking to the CFO. What's that rule of 40? I've never heard it. All of the other points, yeah, that we talk on a daily basis, but what is the
Rule of 40. Okay. Thank you. So the question for those online is, what is the rule of 40? And hopefully I'll get this right. But the rule of 40 says it is basically a way for you to balance growth and profit margin. And so if you are growing at 40% and break even, then that's great. That's hitting the rule of 40. Let's say you're growing at 20%, but you've got 20% profit margin. That also gets to 40. Let's say you've got 40% profit and no growth. That's okay too. Great growth. And so it's kind of, look at those two metrics, percent of growth, and also your margin should add up to 40. And it's kind of just a quick way for investors to give you a score that gives you credit for both growth and profitability. Great question.
Yes. Curious about your customer visits. What incentive do you give customers to give them their time and like you shadow them? Seems a little awkward. I don't know. How do you
Yeah. So the question was customer visits. How do you do that? Because it sounds awkward and it is. And so a few ways. One is hopefully you're talking to customers already through calls, emails, and all that stuff anyway. So you get a little bit of relationships built there. And typically what we would do is just like, hey, we happen to be going to your area anyway this week. And we would love to stop by and learn a little bit more about the company. And, we try to listen to everybody's opinions, but you seem to be like a really good fit for us to learn from. And then they get flattered. I go, oh, okay, that's great. And then you need to set expectations. Say, usually what a visit looks like is just a couple hours. We'll show you the roadmap and get your thoughts on that. We want to talk about all the feature requests you submitted. We've got a list, and all the bugs. We've got a list. We'll talk to you about them. And then usually get them to agree. And then I would follow up and say, oh, and also while we're out there, there's this thing called contextual inquiry or job shadowing, where we would love to just sit with your users and really watch them use the software in their environment. Usually 20, 15 minutes, something like that. Is that okay? And usually it is. So that's usually the way we'd approach it. We do usually offer like bringing in lunch or stuff for them, and use gift cards if you need to bribe them as well. Bring swag, but usually making them feel special and that they have a larger than average influence on the product is usually enough to get them to participate. And it does help too, like being a PM or a director or a VP or C-level, like titles do help with that. So you might, help somebody, have somebody come do the introductions, and then, last minute, C-level can't make it, but we're gonna have the director of product there instead. Yes.
You mentioned the idea that product should lead strategy, and a lot of that involves working with the CEO. How much time ideally do you spend with a CEO, or how much time would you recommend having on their calendar, like dedicated time?
Yeah, great question. The question for those online, how much time should product spend or be maybe with the CEO talking about strategy? And it's the universal answer. It depends, kind of applies here, but I would say like probably 10 or 20 hours a month at least is what I typically have been spending, and it comes in waves. Like right now, in Canopy, we are trying to figure out a few very important things. Like, okay, how up market do we go? Do we want to go more down market? Do we want to expand in other areas? Reviewing competition is very strategic. So, and a lot of that's not just for the CEO, but the executive team, like head of revenue and others that would want to be participants of that. But yeah, a lot of hours a month, if not on a weekly basis, there should be some strategic touch point. Yes.
I really like what you say about like choose a company instead of a compensation, the title, things like that. But those questions, how would you ask the recruiter or hiring manager during the interview to find out? Because some information are not public, right? And the AR, for example, how would you approach during the interview process to find out?
Yeah, that's a great question. And just to repeat the question for those online, some of those questions about financials and metrics might be sensitive. How do you ask that to either the recruiter or hiring manager? Recruiter usually would have some ideas like, hey, how big is the company in either employees or revenue? And if you know one of those, you can usually extrapolate more or less kind of the other. Simple things like, hey, is the company profitable? Or who are the investors? There's probably some things you can tease out for the recruiter. The hiring manager should know a little bit more. And you can always couch it with like, and, if this is sensitive, you don't need to answer it, but I'd be really curious about your X. And it kind of varies too on the company and the position. Like if it's a C-level position, they should tell you all of this and more. Even like director or VP. And you should be very willing to sign an NDA. And I've done that several times. Where like, hey, I know I'm asking for sensitive stuff. Where's your NDA? So I can sign it and protect you. And usually, I've actually been surprised how forthcoming most people are on those things. Quite often, the hiring manager, like if you're PM being hired by a director or PM, they may not know most of those. And you can maybe push for a conversation with the CFO or someone else if it's important enough. But usually you can get enough to give you a pretty good idea. Yes.
Kind of the same thing of product or strategy. Do you have a lot of experience utilizing A/B testing and how that might affect strategy?
Yeah, great question. A/B testing, how much that affects strategy. Again, it really depends on the situation and the company. For example, with Canopy, we don't do A/B testing, mostly because like our users are, like we kind of segmented into accountants or practitioners, and those are like weekly active, probably in the tens of thousands, and so not a huge sample size. But versus like if you're doing e-commerce with millions of page views and stuff like that, that's where A/B testing becomes super critical. And also, it's kind of an analogy of company size and stage as well. A lot of startups and scale-ups are probably what I call the emergency room stage. So imagine somebody walks into the hospital emergency room, their arms literally hanging off. Now is not the time to say, hey, let me measure your body fat. No, now's the time to, kind of the broad brush strokes for the canvas. So just having that understanding too of, okay, where are we at? Do we know more or less what we need to build, or are we really the refinement stage? That's where A/B testing comes along. And at the refinement stage, yeah, you better have grid tooling, instrumentation, metrics to really guide your strategy. Really?
Recommend getting permission to go and visit customers, talk to customers, especially when it's like a big company that maybe has a lot of legal ramifications.
So company from your company, the employer, or the company you are visiting?
Permission from your company to go talk to users, because sometimes that's difficult.
Yeah. The question is, if your company may not be used to this, how do you get permission to do those visits? Especially, I've seen that be a problem. Especially if it's a very large account, maybe a very strategic account that like, no, don't touch that. Like, we don't want anything to go bad. So a lot of that depends on just establishing a relationship and a trust with the executives that might need to approve that. A lot of it is just a lot of education on telling the company and the execs why this is important and letting them know. So for example, let's say it's November. It's a great time to get budget for travel the next year to do company visits. And you say, hey, we believe in seeing things in real life. It just helps us build. And you say, oh, okay, that makes sense. And then when it comes closer, oh, remember that conversation we had? Now's the time that I want to do it. You do want to be cognizant of the accounts and if they're like at risk or problematic. So definitely work with like this head of CSM or head of revenue to make sure that they are at least aware. Because if they are kept in the loop and you work with them on it, even though I actually do not like it when CSMs join this conversation or sales, keep it to product and UX. But if you involve them enough up front, you can usually get permission. Yes.
I might as well add, when you visit them and conduct these customer discoveries, different customer may tell you their story very differently. How do you get a true view or perspective of which area you want to focus?
Yeah, Great question. And the question was, visiting these customers, you might get a lot of different opinions and perspectives and views. How do you make sense of that? And if any of you have not seen Malcolm Gladwell's talk about spaghetti sauce, take a look at that, because that'll answer a lot of the questions. But a lot of it is just numbers. Statistics, n equals 1 is a very bad sample size. And so with visits, you are spending money, so it's harder. So one thing too with visits, like try to pick a major metro area where you can hit a lot of customers in one visit. It just makes more sense, easier to get approval for that way too. But yeah, you just have to do enough visits that you can start to triangulate, see patterns, see trends. But also I think it's a good opportunity for segmentation. It's like, okay, if I'm hearing drastically different things, maybe they're equally valuable. And we just need to understand, like in Canopy's situation. Oh, well, tax workflow is one thing. Bookkeeping is one. Another one. Advisory is completely separate. And then, I'm visiting the customer, they mentioned this, and it's the tax prep answer, and this one's the bookkeeping answer. You can just kind of start to make those patterns.
How important have you found in-person interviews versus remote?
Yeah, in-person versus remote interviews, I'd say, just due to cost and stuff, probably remote is going to be more likely. So you should be doing that, again, on a weekly basis. But in-person is critical, I would say. My rule of thumb, try to get out a couple times a year to do in person. It sounds weird. It's like, what's really that different? Being there versus asking them doesn't sound like a lot, but it is critical. Like kind of a marketing calendar example, just things come out of the woodwork that you never would have expected. So I'd say at least a couple times a year if you can get budget for it. And also I think the visits are very different too, because usually on-site will be a couple hours. You can go a lot deeper in certain areas. And it might depend too on if you are doing more just general discovery about the persona, or if you are going deep on validation. And so there's times too that you might go to an on-site visit and say, hey, line up 20 users. We're going to all have to go through this prototype. We're going to watch them take notes. Doing stuff like that is pretty difficult to do remote. So, but really depends on the situation. Okay. Any final questions? Okay.
At this point in your career, would you go back to an early startup?
Ooh, that is a great question. I don't know. I think I actually would if it were the right one, if it's something that I was really passionate about. In part, my kids are a little bit older now, so that's a little bit easier. Although I can't deal with the sleepless nights as much as I used to, for sure. But yeah, it still excites me. And I have wondered, assuming Canopy goes well, what's the next big thing? I've kind of wondered if a smaller startup would be something to get back into. So they're so much fun. Tons of work, but lots of fun. Okay, well, that's it. Thank you so much for coming.